we're women trying to figure out how to tell stories about our sisters in arms. So on that note, Maureen, could you tell me a little bit about your military service? Because I know that you're an Army veteran, and I know that you're married to an Army officer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I joined the military in 2001 prior to 9/11. So the military that I joined was very different than the military that I ended up serving in. And I joined because I had tried just about every job you can think of and just didn't find that calling that I was looking for. So I made airplane parts that sold the parts to Boeing. I worked at a movie theater. I managed a Dairy Queen. I taught voice lessons. I drove an armored car. And that was really at the armored car company where I worked. It was called Armored Transport. I was really surrounded by all these kind of ex-military gentlemen. And I think that was where I really kind of caught the fever of the military. And so, I tried to join right out of high school, the Navy. And my mother was like, absolutely not. I'm not going to sign the paperwork. I was only 17, so I needed her signature to join. And so I tried all these other things and eventually just ended up joining the service because that was what I wanted to do. And
well, why specifically the Army?
That's a great question. So I am the black sheep of a proud Air Force family. But at the time, all the other branches, or most of them, would only give you like a branch of service. So you could be this category. And I knew when I joined that when I got out, I wanted to be an FBI agent. And I didn't want to do college. I tried college. I was not very good at it. So they had told me that if I do 5 years as a counterintelligence agent, that when I got out, they would waive the college requirement and take me on as an agent. So I ended up joining the Army because they were able to give me the specific job that I wanted. Now I had to fight for it. They tried to get me to do all kinds of like HR and analyst and all these other jobs. And I was like, no, this is what I want to do, where I'm walking out of here.
Well, I will really tell you, just looking at you, the last thing I would ever expect for you to say to me or anybody else that meets you is, hi, I'm a spy. I'm an Army spy. I'm a CIA person or whatever, because you certainly don't look what we in our minds, after countless spy films and all that, imagine what a spy should look like. So kudos to you. And I'm sure that was part of, people would never think that just looking at you. Right? Right?
Yes, people often underestimate me based on what I look like, I think. Even still, sometimes I think that I get underestimated.
And I think that happens to not just you, but I have spent my life being underestimated. And then, I mean, really, when you get right down to it, and a lot of women are, just based on the way we look. Not taken into our skill set or our education or any of that comes later, but the initial reaction is, okay, well, that person can't possibly be a spy or whatever. So I was flabbergasted when you told me that when I first met you back in Palm Springs, when we both attended a Vietnam Veterans of America event back there. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. I do want to clarify. So I wasn't a spy. It was my job to keep spying from happening on the US. So we were counterintelligence.
Okay, counterintelligence. Okay, thank you for the correction. And
yeah, I don't want to end up going to jail for like perjuring myself.
No, you don't. No, you don't. Because the whole idea here is because you are a veteran and you're married to someone who is still on active duty, you eat, sleep, and breathe the veteran cause. So, I mean, that's really, what we're talking about here, telling stories. So tell me, you were in what, 6 years? Is that what you said? Active duty?
About 5.5, yeah.
Okay. So I'm assuming part of the reason you got out is that you, were you married when you were in the military?
Yeah, okay. So I am an AIT marriage. We got married in our job training school. So all of the stigmas that go with it.
Oh, well, that's great. Well, and good for you. Well, good for you. So, but I'm assuming part of the reason you wanted to get out of the military is because you have a family.
Yeah, I actually had my first two children on active duty. I didn't want to get out, but I had gotten hurt in basic and it just kept getting worse and worse. And then we also were starting to realize with our two little ones that something wasn't quite right. At the time, autism was not anything we had thought about. We just thought that, we worked these crazy hour, 14, 16-hour days and we were never there for our kids. And so they just needed a parent to be home with them. So when the doctor brought up, it's probably time for a med board, I didn't fight it. I just was like, okay, let's go through with this. And my husband and I really debated, like, should I fight? Should I stay or should I go? And it's turned out, 15 years later, that this was definitely the perfect decision for our family. But that was one of the hardest things to go through because I loved serving and I loved the job that I did. And I really loved the people I served with. I mean, there's always, some of the things that are difficult to deal with in the military, but overall, like, my service did so much for me that giving it up was very hard. I came in thinking I was this kind of dumb, useless female whose only job up until then had really been to get married and have kids. And the military opened up a whole new avenue or direction I could take my life. And while I did end up getting married and having kids, none of those came at the sacrifice of my military career. I was able to serve and be a mom. And that was awesome. I really loved that. And so giving up that career was heartbreaking for me, but we had to do what was right for both my body and for our children.
Right. And I think because of you having that military background and understanding the military way of life, because it's one thing to be an advocate and speak on behalf of it, but it's quite the other thing if you're actually a veteran yourself. So you can speak to what some of the issues are, because in some ways, especially for women in the military, yes, things have changed. In my time, you couldn't be married. In my time, you couldn't have the little ones. I mean, if you became pregnant, you were medically discharged. You were out. And, thank God the military figured out, they were letting too many women go, that it's, it's all about how do women integrate better into the military, and everyone that serves in the military, it's a learning lesson.
Yes.
As much for the men as it is for the women. Right?
Yes.
So speaking to that, and because I know you are a veteran advocate, I really want you to speak to your advocacy in a couple of ways. I know that you are, and forgive me if I don't get the title right, I actually have your LinkedIn profile right here, but I can't quite see what it says, okay? But I know you work for the Paralyzed Veterans of America, and you're assistant legislative advocate. Is that the right way to say that?
I'm Associate Legislative Director of Government Relations. That's my formal title.
Okay, so I'm assuming what that really means is that you help to create or write legislation on behalf of veterans and present it because you're in the Washington, D.C. area, correct?
Yes.
That you actually present in front of Congress.
Yes, I have had the opportunity to testify before Congress a couple times, and we'll either write legislation or we'll work with offices to improve legislation, or we'll bring them an idea and they'll work on legislation. It's really a collaborative relationship.
And I think you really need to maybe shine a light on that a little bit more and give us a little bit more detail of how that process works, because I know all of the veteran groups, really their end game, if you will, is to make life better for veterans in the hospital, or disabled veterans, or all veterans specifically, just veterans. If you're a veteran, you've served, you got your honorable discharge or whatever, and you're collecting veteran benefits, the government doesn't just give those to you. They don't make that process easy. And part of what you do in legislation is to create bills that help veterans. And can you speak, because you are with the PVA, can you speak a little bit to the legislation that you have on hand now and what you're trying to change for the younger generation of veterans that are coming back from the war now that it's over, supposedly? How do we take care of our severely wounded veterans?
Sure, happy to. I just want to disclose, I'm here as Maureen Elias, not on behalf of PVA, but would be happy to talk about some of the legislation I'm working on. So, one of the things that I've been working on for the last year and a half is for veterans with catastrophic disabilities that meet certain qualifications, you get a certain amount of money, a grant called the automobile allowance from the VBA side of the house to purchase a vehicle. And they do that recognizing that because of the extent of your injuries or your illness, you need a vehicle that can be adapted for your disability. And those are expensive. The grant was originally started back in, I want to say 1946, and was about $1,600, which pretty much covered the cost of a vehicle. Nowadays, the grant's around $21,795, which when we're talking, you usually need a minivan or a Suburban or a larger vehicle. That's really only about half of the cost of the vehicle anyway. But you only get one of those grants in your entire lifetime. And so one of the things that we've been advocating for is for veterans to have an additional opportunity to get another vehicle, because we all know they don't last that long, So that's one of the things that we've been working on. And we actually have two bills that have currently been introduced. One is there's a House and a Senate companion version. And then just recently there was another House version with a little bit different language in it that just got introduced recently.
Well, very good, because now everything is going electrical vehicle. That's they're going to be eliminating gas vehicles within the next decade. And so how do you, if they want everybody to drive an EV, then they certainly need to do that for catastrophic veterans. So that's a wonderful thing. And that's really an example of your veteran advocacy, and why part of why I wanted to interview you is because I know your story. I know you're a friend of mine, okay? And we're both veteran advocates. And I think even though you may not have gotten the career you wanted in the military, I think in the long run, for you to get out the way that you got out of the military and to be a veteran advocate, because you're very passionate about the veteran cause. Because obviously it's near and dear to your heart. You're a veteran, your husband is still active duty military, and you walk the walk, talk the talk, and do the right thing for our veterans. And one of the things that you do, because I know you're a storyteller, is I would like for you to speak to that a little bit about how you became a filmmaker yourself, and especially this project that you're working on with WIMSA, which is Women in Military Service America Memorial, that's at Arlington National Cemetery right there, is a fantastic place. And it's the history of every woman who's ever served in the military is housed there. ASAP, and that does not mean as soon as possible.
I always joke that you can tell the man who started the Armed Services Arts Partnership, or ASAP, was not a veteran, because for most of us who served in the Army, ASAP is the Army Substance Abuse Program, or it was, and so it has a very different connotation. But so what the Armed Services Arts Partnership does is it gives a platform for veterans to reconnect to their communities through the arts. So ASAP teaches veterans for free, veterans, service members, their families, and their caregivers for free, all different kinds of arts. So they have running classes such as storytelling, stand-up comedy, acting, creative writing, and what is the other one? Oh, improv, which is one of my favorites. And then we also have workshops, and the workshops are kind of they're a one class type situation where you learn one specific skill. And so actually my family and I are signed up next week to learn the comic book, how to write a comic book workshop.
Well, that's a great idea, because one of your children is quite the artist, from what I see you post on the Facebook.
Yes, both of my kids, my older two, just love to draw. And actually my baby likes to draw a lot too. So I think, I have a family full of artists, which is funny because I can't draw a stick man to save my life. But so it's really fun because it gives you the skills to do something, to perform an art, but then that's not where it ends. they then give you the opportunity to do performances. So once you've gone through one of the ASAP classes or one of the workshops, then you can perform at any one of the performances that they have all calls for. So you kind of pitch your story or your comedy or whatever. And so you give them the skill set, and then you teach them, or you give them the opportunity to show off that skill set. But then the other cool thing, and one of my favorite things about ASAP, is you build this community of friends. And because they're veterans, or because they're connected to the military community, everyone in the class understands the military life. And so it's very easy to make those bonds. And so I'm one of the storytelling instructors for ASAP. And I'll be honest, when we pivoted to the online classes versus the in-person, I was worried that was something that we would lose. And I was so wrong. Like we've had 2 iterations now, I think, of the online storytelling classes. And we still develop that really cool bond and that friendship that will continue to sustain you as you continue to grow and develop. So I got into storytelling back in 2017 when I was a college student. I was getting ready to graduate from my master's, and I had my, not the principal, what's the president of the university had invited me to give a speech. Me and another I was a graduate student, and they invited an undergrad to come give a talk before the big money people. And I was really excited. So I wrote this beautiful speech, and I recorded it on my phone, and I brought it home, and I played it for my best friend, Tammy, who's a Coast Guard veteran. And I was like, Tammy, what do you think? And she listened, and she said, "Oh, Maureen, I love you so much, but you are so boring." That hurt my heart a little. But what I hadn't realized was, from raising 3 kids on the spectrum and living with a husband who's in the military and dealing with my own issues, I had developed this like perfectly calm, therapeutic, boring voice. And that was what I spoke with all the time. And so I started looking for programs that would help me become a more engaging or insightful speaker. And I looked at things like Toastmasters, and on a college budget, that was never going to happen. And I stumbled across ASAP, and I took the storytelling class. And not only did storytelling help me improve my performance or speaking skills, but it also helped me learn how to express some of those things that I was not comfortable sharing. It taught me how to be vulnerable in a way that I was comfortable with. And so I went on from there to take the improv class, and then I took the stand-up comedy class, and I just finished the creative writing fiction class. And the skills in the community that I've built through ASAP have just really, we've moved cross country during the pandemic. It was hard, and it was lonely and challenging, and we've had to deal with trying to deal with schools being online and teleworking, and that loneliness and isolation that comes with it. And ASAP has really helped me hold those feelings at bay and feel connected to others, which I'm so thankful for.
Getting back to why it's important for women veterans to tell their stories. Why is it important? Because of what you do, and you're doing it with our nation's monument, our nation's library, our nation's history of women veterans serving. Why is it important for women veterans to tell their stories?
I think there's a couple of reasons. Number one is women veterans, especially those who served kind of prior to 9/11, are one of the most invisible populations. They took up the uniform, they went home, they became mothers, sisters, aunties, they did their jobs and just faded into the woodwork. And I think women veterans are very good at that. And a lot of families don't even find out that they had someone in their family who was a woman who served in the military until they pass away, and they find that uniform buried back in the closet. And so I especially encourage women who served in, wars before 9/11 or who served during peacetime to come forward and tell their stories, because it's really important that their legacy and their histories aren't lost. And also, by not sharing your story, you're also kind of denying a little piece of yourself. And I'm guilty of that. For like 12 years after I got out of the military, I moved back to a very conservative community. I was heartbroken at losing my service because I was discharged medically. I didn't feel like I deserved it. I didn't identify as a veteran. And for that whole time, I really struggled in trying to figure out, why do I not feel happy or complete or whole. You know, I have a beautiful home. I have a husband who loves and provides for me. I have these beautiful children. You know, I was able to do whatever I wanted to as far as jobs go within kind of the limitations of being a military spouse and moving all the time. And then finally, I went on this Wounded Warrior Project retreat with Kate Hendricks Thomas and Sarah Plummer. And they were the first moment in my life when I can remember truly accepting and embracing the fact that I was a woman veteran. And it just was so freeing. And then from there, I started to take advantage of some of the opportunities that are out there for veterans. So I did things like the Travis Manion Foundation, which is all about, you know, if not me, then who, and continuing a legacy of service after you leave the military. Working with the High Ground Veteran Advocacy Program, which is where I learned how to become an advocate. And had I never embraced that veteran status, I would have never taken advantage of those programs.
You really speak to something, because that is an issue within the women veterans community, to recognize your service. And then for you personally, Maureen, for you to turn out to be the advocate that you are. And because I've known you for a couple of years and I follow you on Facebook and LinkedIn, I mean, really living a life in service for me, and apparently for you and your family as well, that is the key to happiness in life.
Yeah, I mean, I will say, like, I didn't feel like I felt truly alive after leaving the military service until I got into advocacy. I didn't know what it was actually when I started the High Ground Veteran Advocacy Fellowship. I was like, well, I don't know what it is, but you know what? It's free, so I can afford it. And let's just see what this is all about. And I almost quit that first day because, like, it was just me and four other guys, four male veterans who, you know, one of them had already run for Congress and one of them had already gotten a bill passed. And like, I didn't even know much more besides the fact that there was a House and a Senate. Like, that was, you know, I didn't grow up thinking someday I'm going to work on the Hill. That just wasn't anything that had ever kind of been in my career path. But then once I got a taste of it and watching, you know, most people on the Hill haven't had that experience. You know, you talked about the 5%. And so as you go in and you share about your experiences in the military, you just watch their eyes light up as they finally recognize what it is you're talking about and why you're advocating for what you're advocating for. And when they finally make that decision to sign on to or to introduce legislation or whatever, it is one of the greatest highs I could ever have in my life, because it's not for me. You know, I could care less what happens to me as long as my, you know, kids are healthy and happy, but to know that I'm taking care of the brother and sister to my left and my right, and to those that served before me, and to make sure I'm making it better for those who served after me. It's why I do this. So first I want to hit on one point, and that is, you know, as any woman who has served in the military in US history has done so voluntarily. We have never been drafted. And I think that's an important point to make. Like, none of us were forced to serve. It has always been by choice, and sometimes against very difficult statistics and battles. And so that alone sets you apart, because we are an all volunteer force. And then I think, you know, a lot of times when women come into the storytelling class, whether that be through WIMSA or through ASAP in our full boot camp, a lot of them think they have to tell their military story. But here's the thing, when we're talking about bridging the civilian military divide, sometimes telling the story about losing your mother, or that time your child was covered in poop, or, you know, the time that you got fired from your job, reminds civilians that we all put on our pants the same way, that while we have done this military service, we are still humans just like them, and we want to integrate with the community. And so I think sometimes not, you know, telling any story that we want to tell helps bridge that divide between military and civilian. And I think that's one of the reasons it's so important for women to get out there and be talking, because it just reminds the earth that, you know, here's who we are. We did serve, but here's also who we are. You know, being a veteran is only one of my identities. I'm a veteran, I'm a mother, I'm a person with a disability, I'm a, you know, a working mother, I'm a wife, a sister, a cousin, an auntie, a really good friend, I'm a hoot. You know, if you get me going, I can crack you up till you wet your pants. And, you know, so it's just a piece of my identity. But when it comes to the WIMSA, that has been really fun because with ASAP, we don't do gender specific classes. We try to do a mix, like half women, half men. But with WIMSA, it was my first time teaching an only women class. And for WIMSA, we're only teaching the storytelling crash course. So that's just a one-time 3-hour course. And we're hoping it gives them the incentive to go on and do the boot camp, which is 6 weeks of classes with the final graduation performance. So it gives you kind of the hook. So hopefully you'll do the full thing. But I think I've taught 4 or 5 classes now through WIMSA. And the very first time we did it, I almost had to go off camera because that opportunity to be with all those women who were wanting to share their stories, but almost a little bit either intimidated or shy or not sure about what story to tell or how to tell their story. A lot of them had stories they wanted to tell, but it was something that made them vulnerable and they were uncomfortable with how to share that. And so the woman who teaches with me, her name is Stephanie Garibaldi, and she's actually a civilian, but she gets it. You know, sometimes there are civilians that just get it, and she gets it, and she teaches the class with me. And the work that Stephanie and I do really empowers women and gives them the skills and the understanding, not only just to tell their story, but to find their story. Because sometimes we think we only have like 1 or 2, and maybe our stories are only that are in the service. But it's our whole life is a story that others want to listen to. So the first story that I ever performed actually had nothing to do with the military, except for the fact that I mentioned that my husband was in Afghanistan. But it's the story that the day my third child got diagnosed with autism, meaning I have 3 children now with autism, and what that day felt like. And so, but it had nothing to do with me being a veteran and just having to do with me as a mom dealing with this extraordinary situation. And so many mothers and fathers of people on the spectrum have reached out and been like, oh my gosh, I have never known how to express how I felt. Thank you for sharing that, because I was able to express it through you. And I think that the skills that we teach women, especially through the WIMSA ASAP storytelling course, it helps you find the stories you need to tell and realize how many stories you have to tell. And then we give you some of the skills to start sharing your stories. And then once you've taken that WIMSA course, you are now open for any of the ASAP alumni performances. So now we've given you the stage to go start sharing your stories with the nation. And so I think that's why I like it. It's just watching these women find their stories, become empowered, and then have the opportunity to go share it is really exciting.
Maureen, I just think that's like, first of all, it's a pleasure to have you as a friend. So thank you for your friendship. And it's a pleasure to get to know you a little bit more through this interview. And thank you for your advocacy for veterans, because there's so many benefits for veterans that are available to them that, you know, they just don't know. That's part of the reasons we are involved in these groups, is to educate veterans. Get involved, join a group, find your passion, find something to do, find something that excites you, because once again, there's a veteran group out there that is exactly what you're looking for. Thank you for what you do.
This
Say
was so
hi
much
to the
fun.
captain for me.
I will.
Thank you so very much.
All right, you take care.
Okay, you too.